Rise and growth of modern nation state. The state in its present form has gone through a long historical process, and a number of factors like kinship, religion, property, and political consciousness have played an important role in the evolution of the state. Family was the institution which may have been patriarchal or matriarchal, which brought order and security for an individual. Family expanded, but the ties of blood relation created a strong bond among them. When ties of kinship weakened, it was religious obedience and obligation which held large families together. When family expanded to clans and clans to tribes, it led to settling down of men. This gave rise to property, which created problems. As a result, laws and authority to protect, regulate, and settle disputes became essential. Thus, law and authority contributed to the evolution of state. Lastly, political consciousness among the people for a political agency for maintenance of law and order and for the defense from external dangers led to the evolution of state. The forms of state in the course of historical evolution are as follows. First, the tribal state. The tribal state was the earliest form of organization. They were governed by tribal chief. They were nomadic. They could not be regarded as a state because they had no permanent settlement. The main purpose of the organization was to maintain order among themselves and to protect from external dangers. They were bound by birth and religion. Thus, there was loyalty and obedience to the commands of the tribal chief. The tribes in India, the Red Indians, Jennies of Australia belonged to the primitive tribal organizations. Second, the Oriental Empire. The wandering tribes settled on the river banks of Sindhu, Ganga, Nile, Yellow River, took to agriculture. These river banks attracted people belonging to different kinship groups. It created conflicts among different groups and led to intermingling of these groups. The prosperity led to war and expansion of territory by subjugating the weaker ones and establishing an empire. This perhaps led to the beginnings of a state. For example, Chandragupta Maurya of India or Hammurabi of Babylon. The rulers ruled with authority with the backing of the priests who were guardians of religion. The empires were made up of subordinate units who enjoyed freedom in local affairs but obliged to supply soldiers and pay tributes. Thus, the central authority was not centralized. Conquest and revolt was the order of the day, which led to disintegration of these empires. Third, the Greek city-state. The region around Aegean and Mediterranean was suitable for social organization due to its geographical factors, that is, mountains and the sea, which created natural defense and also made it possible for outside contact. The Greeks used the term polis for city states. Polis was a fortified position on a hill to which inhabitants could flee for refuge during attack. Each city-states like Athens, Sparta, Thebes, Rhodes had its own government, laws, customs, institutions, coinage, and apart from this, the territory was small and citizenship was enjoyed by a few. Slaves and women had no right to participate in the affairs of the government. The small size of the territory and population provided for close relation between government and the citizens. Greeks upheld life partnership with the state and believed that it was impossible to reach the highest life apart from the city-state. Such prosperous states disintegrated due to internal rivalry and war amongst themselves and external invasion from Macedonia and Rome. Fourth, the Roman Empire. After the fall of Greek civilization, the Roman Empire was established on the banks of river Tiber. The various settlements came under the control of Rome by conquest or by federation. Monarchy was adopted where the king was the patriarch, chief priest, judge, and commander-in-chief, but he was supposed to consult the Senate. Monarchy was replaced by republic, which was aristocratic. They adopted the system of checks and balance, which prevented concentration of powers in the hands of any official or body. The plebeians, who were powerless, agitated for their rights. Their demands were granted. Thus, the plebeians enjoyed greater privileges than the Greek slaves. The selfishness of the patrician, the politics of power, conspiracies, and murders, and power struggle led to the downfall of the Republic. The seizure of power by Julius Caesar and the rise of Augustus as emperor announced the fall of the Republic. Thus, the Romans demonstrated to the world how to rule over a vast empire with varied cultures, customs, and languages. It gave a well-organized and well-governed empire to the world. Fifth, the feudal state. Towards the end of the 5th century, Roman Empire disintegrated and Europe witnessed chaos and disorder. The feudal state grew to meet the needs of the chaotic times. Ordinary people who were in need of protection for themselves and their property went to the neighboring noble and surrendered themselves to him. And he in turn agreed to protect them under certain conditions through a contract. The political, economic, and social structure was associated with land. The king was the lord and he distributed lands or estates among the nobles who became his vassals. These nobles subdivided the land among their vassals. At the bottom of the feudal structure were serfs who were bound to the land. The vassals had to provide services and make payments in the hierarchical organization. The vassals enjoyed all rights over the people living within their jurisdiction. The ownership of land determined an individual's political rights. So land was essential. The serfs who were at the bottom of the ladder had no status and privileges because they did not own land. The feudal state saved Europe from ruin. It prevented kings from being autocratic and made nobles self-reliant and independent. It made the central government weak. The barons turned traitors, misused their armies, and rebelled against the king. The barons fought with each other. This disturbed the peace and promoted anarchy. Sixth, the church authority. With the fall of the king, the Christian church emerged as a unifying factor. Roman Emperor Constantine became a Christian, and towards the end of the 4th century AD, Christianity was recognized as the official religion of the Roman Empire. The church was well organized and it functioned efficiently like a state and promoted unity in the Christian society. The Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation and exposure of corruption, immorality, and false teachings of the church by men like Martin Luther, John Calvin, and John Huss undermined the authority of the church. As a result, individualism and nationalism became the order of the day as it was preached by Martin Luther, John Calvin, and John Huss. Seventh, the absolute monarchy. Monarchs used this new faith to take the authority from the church. This gave rise to absolute monarchs. People were fed up with war and anarchy and were waiting for governance of a king who would give peace, stability, security, and prosperity. The Stuarts and the Bourbons ruled with absolute power and was a model to monarchies of Austria, Prussia, and Russia. Eighth, the establishment of nation states. The wings of the Stuart kings, who ruled by the divine right of kings, was cut down by the parliament. The revolution in America and France shook the foundations of monarchy. The principles of equality, liberty, and sovereignty caught the imagination of the people. The revolution created capitalists who indirectly controlled and influenced the government. The capitalists exploited the workers and created a society in which wealth was in the hands of a few people. This led to the rise of new concepts like communism and socialism against capitalism. The Industrial Revolution led to the emergence of an industrial merchant class. The Renaissance, the Reformation movement, and the influence of writers who put forward concepts like equality, liberty, rule of law, justice, was conducive to the growth of democracy. In England, the powers of the absolute monarchs were clipped by Parliament, thus paving the way for the establishment of constitutional monarchy. England, mother of parliamentary system, proved that good government is possible when power is in the hands of the people. USA and France also adopted democracy. Democracy and nationalism led to unification of countries in Europe. The Industrial Revolution required new sources of raw materials and new markets for their products, and nationalistic pride led to colonialism and imperialism in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The main aim was to exploit the natural and human resources of these countries. So, on one hand, liberty, equality, rule of law in Europe, while imperialistic exploitation in backward countries. Aggressive nationalism and imperialism were the cause of World War I. The humiliating treaty led to the rise of dictators like Hitler, Mussolini, who, in the name of glorification of the state, attacked and annexed territories, which led to World War II. After the end of World War II, the world was divided into two blocks, USA and USSR, and countries either followed democracy and capitalism or totalitarianism and communism. Nationalistic movements and awareness about concepts like liberty, democracy in the colonies gave rise to the demand for independence from colonial rule. The social, economic, and political life of the colonies was in shambles because of imperialist rule for a long period of time. The colonies that gained independence had a long way to go to build themselves because of divisive forces. The newly independent colonies did not join either of the superpowers, instead joined the non-aligned movement. The newly independent colonies adopted the socialist principles where both public and private sector existed. They later adopted liberalization, which led to the establishment of international law and organizations to regulate trade, maintain peace and security, to develop science, art, culture, technology, etc., and to resolve various issues like poverty, pollution, violation of human rights, water scarcity, and to bring about sustainable development. Exploitation existed, but new form of exploitation called neocolonialism emerged. That is, developing nations needed technology and machinery from developed nations. In return, the developing countries had to provide their resources. The import and export of various commodities did not meet the standard of the developed nations. As a result, developing nations suffered. highly qualified people from developing countries study at public expense to other countries in search of jobs or for higher education, causing brain drain. These problems need to be resolved to save humanity from exploitation and injustice. Those who have migrated and have become citizens of those countries continue to maintain contact and contribute to their country's growth. Nation states need to provide protection to its people, but no state is capable of providing security because of new weapons and armaments. The dumping of industrial waste, electronic items, fumes from factories, burning of agricultural waste has caused pollution. Cutting of forest, misuse of coastal areas has caused soil erosion. Reckless construction work has an impact on weather and leads to global warming. The revolution in information technology makes it possible for information to be accessed by anyone in any part of the world. The policy of liberalization reduced the economic barriers. Thus, revolution in information and the policy of liberalization led to the creation of global village. There are different problems arising in this new world. So nation states will have a new role to play in the new scenario where the sovereignty and authority is threatened.